Good afternoon, everyone, and happy Tuesday afternoon. You have found us on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze, and I am Hank Phillippi Ryan, your host, and I am so pleased that you are joining us this afternoon to talk about an absolutely fantastic book. If you don't know, as I said, I'm Hank Phillippi Ryan, USA Today bestselling author of 13 going on 14 novels of suspense. My current book is Her Perfect Life. It's displayed behind me, but I need to show you that it's no longer going on 14. Today, the new book, how it looks as the real precious new book, arrived, which comes out February 7th. And that is the last you're going to hear about that book today, because we are focusing today on City Under One Roof by Iris Yamashita. And you all, it is fascinating. It is quirky. It is touching, it is heartbreaking, it is scary and dangerous and sinister, and the setting is unlike anything you've ever been to in fiction before. I highly, highly, highly recommend this book. You will absolutely love it, and one lucky blazer on Crime Time will win a copy of this book, courtesy of Iris Yamashita and her wonderful publisher, Berkeley. So leave a question, leave a comment, leave applause, anything you want in the comments, and you will be entered to win on the Wheel of Fun at the end of the show to win a copy of the blazingly fabulous City Under One Roof by Iris Yamashita. I adored this book, and I'm going to gush for like one more minute about it, or maybe 30 seconds. I adored this book, and I couldn't turn the pages fast enough. And then on Sunday, I opened the New York Times book review, which is the coolest thing that could ever happen to an author. And I open it to Sarah Weinman, like, as I always do. And I see there's City Under One Roof by Iris Yamashita. And Sarah Weinman calls it a captivating debut. A captivating debut. Can't do better than captivating from Sarah Weinman. She is a tough and marvelous critic. And that is what she said about City Under One Roof. Let me tell you what Publishers Weekly said in a starred review. I love Iris is looking happy. You should look happy. I'll let you talk in a minute. I promise I will. Listen to this from Publishers Weekly, a star. Unusual topography. Now, I just want to ask you, when was the last time you read a review that began with those two words? Unusual topography. You just don't hear that. Anyway, plays a major role in screenwriter Yamashita's atmospherically charged debut that leads to a spellbinding, unforgettable climax and an unpredictable resolution. This distinctively original perspective on a, quote, community of stragglers, oddballs, and recluses heralds the arrival of a major new talent. And I know that sounds like a lot, you all, but this is true. This is an exceptionally good book. It is captivating from moment one, with a surprise on every page. People you've never met, places you've never been, problems you've never encountered, situations that you could never have dreamed of. And that is why Iris Yamashita is known as a major new talent. Iris, I'll let you talk. What did you think when you read those things?
Oh, of course. I was just thrilled. And thank you too, Hank, for that wonderful introduction and your enthusiasm. It's really... the whole book world has been so warm and welcoming that, it's been truly a surprise, a dream come true, everything an author could ever want, for sure, for a debut novel. I'm so happy.
It's great. And you see all the people who are here today to applaud you. Catherine Holland is here, and Susie Baldwin is here, and Anissa is here, and Renee is here, and Sue Johnson Bishop is here. Everybody coming to congratulate you on this debut novel. We're talking about City Under One Roof from Berkeley, which is just out January the 10th to wild, wild acclaim. Let me tell you a little bit about Mighty Blaze. If you have never been here before, wow, we are so pleased that you are here. Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic by the amazing powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us all reading and keep us all meeting new authors and discovering new books and reading the books from authors we already love and maybe finding a new favorite. And we are still going strong with dozens of volunteers and maybe a dozen shows. We're always on 24/7 with something marvelous about book world. And Shannon Hansen, one of our veterans, is saying congrats on a great debut. And Linda Olds Burrell says great reviews, love debuts, and you will love City Under One Roof, as we do. We welcome you all to Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest just for 10 seconds, and then I will let her talk. I know you're like, Hank, stop talking. You want to hear from Iris, and you will. But Iris Yamashita is an Academy Award nominated screenwriter for the movie Letters from Iwo Jima. She has been working in Hollywood for 15 years, developing material for both film and streaming, has taught screenwriting at UCLA, and is an advocate of women and diversity in the entertainment industry. She has also been a judge and mentor for various film and writing programs, and she lives in California, and we welcome her. She is in Alhambra, California today. So Iris, I want to talk about setting and secrets and families and proximity and female empowerment and all those themes. But I have to tell you, I mean, these are my notes on the back of the book. Oh, you can't see that. It says setting, setting, setting. Talk a little bit about the setting of City Under One Roof.
Yes, so City Under One Roof is inspired by a real city in Alaska. And in my fictional town, everybody lives in one building. In the real town, most of the people live in one building, and it was originally set up as a military base. So it was kind of inaccessible and secretive. So to get there, you have to go through a one-way tunnel. It's a very narrow tunnel, and before it used to only be by train through the tunnel that goes through a mountain. But now they've opened it up to car traffic, so you can travel by car, and it switches directions every half hour or so. So it's a very secluded, claustrophobic place in remote Alaska, and it just felt like, this would be a great setting for a murder mystery. And so, of course, my protagonist goes to investigate a gruesome crime there, and an avalanche causes the tunnel to close. So then it becomes a Lock City type of mystery.
So, Iris, this is, I mean, you're telling this, and I hope people are imagining this because this is truly City Under One Roof, a big apartment building called Dave Co. Tell a little bit about what Dave Co. is.
Yeah, so when it was a military base, there were actually two high-rise buildings where all the military personnel lived. But then there was a huge earthquake that basically destroyed the base. And so one building is just an empty shell. And then the other building, they converted into condos. And that's where or in my book, all the population lives. And it has it's supposed to have everything that you would need, like a grocery store and the police department, and there's a little hotel or inn. And so so everybody, and the school is like a tunnel away, so you don't ever have to go out. And that's it's a relic from the military time, but it's also convenient in this kind of weather where it can be 150 miles per hour winds outside, and the temperature can go to -35, and our character says your eyelashes can freeze. So in that sense, it's convenient that you don't have to go out, but it's also very claustrophobic, of course, as our main protagonist, who is the outsider, finds out. And the Dave Co. I call it the Dave Co. It's actually the long name is the Davidson condos. But I mean, that's not in the real city. They have a nickname too for their condo. So I just thought, yeah, they'd have a nickname.
So, what is the real city? And have you been there?
Yes, the real city is Whittier, Alaska. And right now it's kind of it's a place where during the summer season it's kind of a happening place because there are cruise ships and they embark and disembark there. But I mean, no one stays. It's just to get on the ship and get off the ship, and then they go usually to Anchorage. And so it's only during the summertime, it's a bustling little town. There's gift shops and things. But in the winter, it pretty much shuts down, and not a lot of people would come to visit during the winter because there's not much you can do there. And I did visit the real city, but it was during the summer, so it was a little more bustling, and it's got a beautiful view from I did stay in the building, and it's got a beautiful view of the Sound, and it's not
But
like
it's weird, Iris, but it's weird when and I'm sitting here thinking, oh, all right. And but they all live in the same building. Everything is in the same building. Why did they do that? Just because it's so cold? And why would anyone stay there?
Yeah, so that is the question. Why would you stay there? And so that was kind of what was in my mind as I was writing this book that especially when I first started thinking of this story, I think the documentary that I had seen was over 20 years ago. I mean, I hadn't had a story, but the setting stayed in my mind, and that was back when there was only only way in was by train. And so my thought was like, why would you stay in such a secluded place? And those were the questions I was trying to answer in my book. Like what kind of, why are people there? So everybody in my book has a secret motive for being there, including the protagonist, the detective who's investigating this murder.
Well, as Kara, the detective, enters the city through the tunnel, and we know that she is unhappy in this tunnel. As she's driving in and she wants to go, she needs to find out what happened there for a variety of reasons. And she has a lot of secrets, which we don't know as we're driving in with her. And you immerse her by taking her through this tunnel, you immerse her and us into this story. She goes in one person and she's going to come out another person with another experience. What was it like why did you decide to do that? I mean, it's such a cinematic thing to do. Why did you decide to do it that way? And what was that like to write?
Yeah, it's the classic, the outsider that arrives to the town. And I had also had this feeling like when you're driving through that very narrow tunnel that I had mentioned, it's 2.5 miles long. And it's kind of mesmerizing because it's like a mine going through a mine cave.
Mhm.
But I also thought of like falling through a rabbit hole. So my book is actually full of Alice in Wonderland references. So she is like Alice dropping into Wonderland. And I thought, for sure, this Wonderland place must be full of these kind of odd, quirky characters like Alice in Wonderland. So I have the story told in three voices. And Kara is the outsider. So she's Alice dropping into Wonderland. And then I have a teenager, her name is Amy Lynn, and her mother runs the local Chinese restaurant. And I think of her as kind of like the white rabbit that our protagonist chases sometimes for clues. So she's sort of the white rabbit character. And
Well,
then my
let me
third
just, I want to take the third character in a second because Kara and Amy and Lonnie, each one is fascinating. Each one goes on a journey. Each one has secrets. And as their stories braid together and they understand each other and come together in the end, it's quite emotional, actually, and heartbreaking at the end how their stories intertwine. But I met Amy on page one. We meet Amy on page one and know nothing about her. We know nothing about her. Let me just read you a tiny little bit, you all. So this is how the book begins. Chapter 1, Amy. And when did you find the body? Officer Newworth paused for a moment before adding, parts. When did you find the body parts? It was a hand and a foot, to be exact, or at least Amy thought there was a foot. She hadn't bothered to look inside the boot, but since Officer Newworth said parts instead of part, she assumed there must have been a foot, a bloated, sawn-off, purple-blotched piece of flesh that would have made her dry heave at the sight. Yesterday, around 11 a.m., she said. She was pretty sure she had mentioned this detail at least 6 times that very day. And at that moment in the book, I thought, oh, that's a kid. That's a kid. Before I got to when you said that it was a kid. How did you channel that perfect kid voice and attitude and level of understanding of Amy? That she's just such a brilliant character. Didn't you love that, you guys? You can hear that, right?
It was actually difficult. In my first pass, I don't think I had everybody's voices
Oh,
completely down. I mean, I had I think I had Lonnie down, but for Amy, I think my first pass, it wasn't that great. And I have a writers group where I bring everybody brings pages and we kind of workshop or we give our comments. And I think someone had commented that she didn't hear Amy's voice. And so I went back and I did a character by character pass as well.
mm.
And I mean, her voice kind of developed as I started writing more pages, and then I went back and then I rewrote her. But yes, to get the teenager's voice, because it's been a long time since I've been a teenager. I don't have any kids. So I think just trying to be more conscious of how teenagers talk, and a lot of them have the fast rhythm where they talk really fast, and so then I was trying to write that as well, like combining many words together in one long run-on kind of sentence.
No, she's great. She's absolutely great and engaging and charming and captivating, as Sarah Weinman says. She also a teenager, and Anicia is saying, "Wow, what a beginning!" Yes, indeed. And I see Vicky Gregory is asking, "How many passes did you do for this book?" Sometimes that's hard to figure out. You just keep going and going till it's right.
Yeah, for this book, I definitely was going at a much slower snail's pace because I was, I was still working in Hollywood and I was teaching. So it took a number of years actually to write this. So I'm not quite sure how many
Yeah.
passes I did, but I know for the second book, I had to go much quicker, but I wanted to do at least 3 passes. And I always do my first pass when I'm writing screenplays as well. I do a vomit draft. So
Yeah.
that's where you're not like editing yourself and you're not trying to make yourself perfect, and you just want to figure out, I have a general outline, but things change, of course. You must know, your characters start talking to you and everything changes, and you just go through to the end, and then nothing is precious in that draft. So you can go back and you can throw everything out, and then I do another pass, which I make it like good enough for my writers group, I guess, to kind of share like where at least they're complete sentences and they're, there's the stories being told. And then because I'm working with 3 voices, I also wanted to make sure I do a character pass, because when you're writing 3 different voices, you might not be consistent, and you want to make sure in the
Yeah.
character pass that their voice is consistent
I
and
mean, it's
unique.
interesting to think about that because the vomit draft, I sort of call it the momentum draft because I'm just in that first draft and there's a freedom to saying, this is going
Mhm.
to be terrible. I know this is going to be terrible. It doesn't matter because you're really, as an author, you're just telling the story to yourself. You're just seeing
Mhm.
what the story is. And then you can go back and make it this great story with, that's connecting with themes and people talk the way they're supposed to talk and you know who the bad guy is. But until you get through it and know what happened, then you can go back and make it perfect. And do you love that? Do you love the editing part? I love that. I think that's the ball game is editing.
The editing is hard. I think the vomit draft for me is fun because I
Oh,
feel like that's when I'm also discovering what's going to happen myself, because sometimes I don't really know. And for instance, when I started, I did not really know what Amy's secret was. And I discovered it as I was writing the vomit draft. And then, the editing, it's a little more torturous because then I feel like, okay, now it's more like I'm setting it in stone and I can't deviate too much. So it's harder, but yeah, every process has its perks and downsides.
I'm making a poster of that. I'm totally making a poster of that. Every process has its perks and downsides. That's great. So we have the detective Kara, who has secrets and who has a past and who is on her way to, is it Point Metier? Do you say Metier or Metier?
In my mind, the correct way is Point Metier, but because we always butcher names, especially as Americans, I just call it, the locals call it Point Metier.
and you have a lot of local flavor in this. A lot of the, they call outsiders otters because they're
Yes.
others, and it's nice. It makes it feel very real, really real, and it takes you there. I mean, we live there, you all. We live in Point Metier. We're talking about City Under One Roof by Iris Yamashita, her debut novel, which the New York Times calls captivating, and indeed it is. So we have Kara, the detective with secrets and a past, who's on her way, the outsider coming in. We have teenage Amy, who has her secrets and has her misconceptions and the things that she's learned. She's the one that found the body. And then we have Lonnie. Talk about Lonnie.
Yeah, Lonnie Mercer, I call her Moose Lady Lonnie because she has a pet moose named Denny. She has a mental disability, so it makes her talk in word salads. And she also wears a different beret every day, which makes her sort of the Mad Hatter character.
Yes.
But she was my favorite character because she is the most unique voice. But she was the most difficult to write. Like, I mean, I knew what her voice was going to be, but to actually write it was another thing. It was a little more difficult than I thought it was going to be. So I only have short chapters.
Yes, I mean, Margaret in the back room is saying there's a pet moose, mic drop. And it makes so much sense in the book. And you write Lonnie so respectfully and so tenderly. I mean, she's heartbreaking. We're in her head. Tell us what word salad is. Describe it for us so I can find an example of it if you'd rather.
Yeah, it's hard to describe, but she goes off into tangents where she's talking about one thing and then it might rhyme with something else and she goes into another thing. So it doesn't always make sense what she says. But she is a very intuitive character. So the way I think of it is she has a different way of thinking of things, but it doesn't mean she isn't smart.
She's superly smart, I think, and superly sensitive. And she's afraid of something. Here's one, the very first one I came across. She said she looked through the glass doors and saw snow flying around like clothes in a washing machine. There's a storm outside. Blast, gale, blizzard, gust, squall. There's a storm outside. I mean, you can feel her brain organizing itself, and it's just pinging on all cylinders faster than most of ours do. And it does let us into her head. And it also, she's sort of a crucible with how people deal with her, whether people deal with her respectfully and like a friend or take care of her, or whether they dismiss her as someone who is an idiot and doesn't know what she's doing and way too quirky with that moose. Do you see what I mean? We decide who we like a little bit by how they deal with her.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of the unique setting is that it is a community. And so there's good things and bad things about being, holed up in a building and, you're 24/7 with your neighbors. So you can love them or you can hate them, but there is sort of a necessity also being remote that they kind of depend on each other in a way. And so they kind of look out for each other. So I think most of the town, they look out for her. And she has, because this is a trait sometimes with some people with mental disabilities, that they think that, people are saying certain things or thinking certain things when they really aren't. But I think in general, this is a community that look out for her in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. And she's quite endearing and quite pivotal to the story. The three women characters, as I was saying, their stories come together in the end, and it's a story about each of their empowerments. Was that first of all, is that a theme? And secondly, was that something that you thought about consciously going in, the growth and change that each of these characters discovers in this book?
Well, definitely something that I've learned from screenwriting is that you do want every character to have an arc, or at least the main characters. You want all the main characters to have arcs. So, they start somewhere in the beginning of the story, but you want them to end up somewhere else. And, usually it's something not physical, but emotional. So that's what I strive for. And definitely the kind of the theme of women is strong in this book, and it will be in my book too as well. And that's a little bit about learning about Alaska and learning sort of the statistics about women in Alaska, and that there's a lot of violence against women there. And so that did kind of naturally come out as a theme.
Yes, it's really powerful and really touching how there's something that happens to each of them that tilts them into a new way of life. It's quite an emotional book. It's a murder mystery, you all. There's no question that it's a murder mystery. Iris, when someone says to you, "What is your book about?" What do you tell them in your little pitch? How do you describe this book?
Well, if it's a very short, like a one-liner, I would say it's like Twin Peaks meets Fargo.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's perfect because it's freezing and it's quirky, and there are really good people and there are really bad people. And they're all, especially in Daveco, in this one place, which has, just like people, has secret passages and tunnels and characters and conflict within. It's just so claustrophobic. But it's a murder mystery. What was the first puzzle piece that you had in writing this book? What did you say to yourself? I'm going to write a book about what?
Well, what started the journey is I was, I came from the film world, and I wanted to get into the streaming world because I'm not known in the streaming world. And I thought, I've got to come up with some samples to write, because that's, to how you get your script, how you get some notices, you have to write samples in that space. So I was trying to think of what can I write as a sample. And I just remember, I think it was Top of the Lake was by Jane Campion, was also a murder mystery series that I watched, and I just fell in love with. And I thought, maybe I'll try that, a murder mystery.
Was that in Australia? Was that in Australia at the Top of the Lake?
Yeah, I think it was Australia. Yeah. And
Sort of
so
like so you decided you'd write a murder mystery.
yes, and that's when I started thinking, oh, I remember this place, and I think it would be a great setting for a murder mystery. So I started with that, and then just started writing a pilot without having an idea of where it was going to go. So I only had like the first 60 minutes of a possible series as a sample.
That's
And
amazing.
yeah.
Margaret was telling us it's New Zealand.
Oh, is it New Zealand?
Margaret can Google faster than we can retrieve from our poor embattled brains. So New Zealand for Top of the Lake. Yeah. So did you start with the crime? Did you start with Kara the detective? What did you start with?
I'm trying to remember what. Yeah, I think I started with the idea of these body parts washing up, because that was another thing that was like a real phenomenon that was happening at the time, where these like disembodied, shoes like would be washing up on the Pacific coast. I've since learned that it happens on the East Coast as well, and just the intrigue of that. So that was the crime. And I think I had I mean, I don't know which came first. But I think that's where the inspiration came for the body parts washing up on the shore. And then what, like, a producer really liked my pilot and said I should, outline a whole series. So then I, started outlining the whole series, and that became book one, or the first season at least, and that became book one.
I mean, it is so visual and so cinematic. The entire book, we're talking about City Under One Roof. It says "Live together, die alone," which is that's fun, but it is quirky and funny, I have to say. But it is bleak and freezing and claustrophobic and marvelous, but it's so visual, it's so cinematic. The movie in my mind started rolling the minute that I started reading this book. Do you think that your screenwriting and your Hollywood experience has informed how you make choices in your novels?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I did always wanna write a novel since I was little, but
Oh,
I could never finish because it takes a lot more work than a screenplay. And so I started taking screenwriting classes instead, because I started out taking novel writing classes, and then I switched over to screenwriting and found it was much easier to finish because it was only about 100 pages for a film with a lot of white space. And I thought, oh, I can actually finish one of these. But by taking these classes, it really helped me figure out how to structure a story more so that when I came back to writing a novel, it really helped to um, how to outline and how to think of it, think of like a three-act structure and how to think of the character arcs, all those things that I learned from screenwriting are definitely going in to the novel version.
it's funny how things we think that are experiences, individual experiences, turn out to color everything that we do from then on. You think, well, I couldn't have done this if I hadn't been a screenwriter before. I mean, it's so obviously works visually and as a book. We're talking about City Under One Roof by Iris Yamashita, and we are giving away, well, I'm not giving away this, but Iris is giving away, and Berkeley is giving away, Penguin Random House is giving away a copy of City Under One Roof to one lucky commenter or question. So this is your last chance to leave a question in the comments. I see Shannon Hansen is saying, I'm hooked. I got to get my hands on a copy. And Lynn Hanman is saying, me too. And Renee says, I agree. And so this is great. I'm definitely adding your book to my TBR list, says Susie Baldwin. You have made new friends and new fans, and I am pleased about that. When so do you remember when you opened your box of books and saw your first novel for the first time?
Yes, because actually it came really late as as I had originally thought my boxes of books came and I was so excited and I took pictures and posted it and everything, and then I found out that none of them belonged to me because they
What?
had to be signed. They had to be signed and sent
Oh,
to the bookstore that I mentioned, the Poison Pen. So they all got signed, and then they were all forwarded to the bookstore. And then where's my books? And there was a snafu, so they didn't send mine till I think like a week after the release date. And then I was like, I finally got them, and I had promised a bunch of people books, and then I sent books to people that were in my acknowledgement that I owed books to, and I sent them all to the wrong people, and now I have to do a
you're like,
musical
dear
chairs.
Sally, thank you for everything, and that went to Jimmy or whatever you just said.
Exactly. That's what happened, and so now I'm in the process of, like, where did all the books go, and how do I get them to the right people?
Never a dull moment. Never. Everybody will be happy. The books will be very valuable because they're signed to the wrong person. You gotta love that. And yes, Poison Pen does have signed copies. We love, love, love Poison Pen, Barbara Peters, and all the gang at Poison Pen who are, oh my golly, such wonderful and enthusiastic supporters of mystery and thriller world. And we could not live without them, right? I mean, I think they're amazing, and I'm pointing you all to Poison Pen Bookstore because if you don't win your copy right here today, you know where you can go to get a signed copy of City Under One Roof by Iris Yamashita. Let's take questions I have a million more questions for you, but hey, I'm going to take questions. Catherine says, what interested you in writing a novel after screenwriting? Are the two experiences, that's a great question, very different?
Yeah, so I had mentioned that I was trying to think of a series for streaming, and so that's what got me So I had outlined a whole, like one season, and it felt like I'd done so much work that there was enough here to write a novel. And that's how I switched over to writing it as a novel. And the experiences, I will say, it's much more torturous to write a novel for sure
Mhm.
because there's so much more time involved, as I had mentioned. Um, but it feels much more rewarding. And I think when you're coming from screenwriting, and even, writing for streaming media, a lot of times it's not your original work. Usually you get an assignment. So like my first job, my, Letters from Iwo Jima, for instance, that was an assignment, and I've gotten a lot of jobs since then where they were assignments. So it's taking a book and adapting it, or someone else's idea. Like in Letters from Iwo Jima, they were making Flags of Our Fathers, and they decided, oh, let's do the Japanese perspective of this. So it was the producer's idea, and then there's like sometimes they'll just take a true story and then they want you to adapt that. So most of the time, your paid jobs are someone else working off of someone else's idea or work, whereas a book, of course, they want you to come up with something original. So in that sense, it's much more rewarding. And when you're in screenwriting, a lot of times you are just the writer. So you're sort of like a cog in this machine, and it takes a ton of people. It takes lots of people are involved, and lots of money is involved. And so you're just a little part of it. Whereas the book, you're everything. You're the director, you're the writer, you're the cinematographer, you're the casting director, you're everything.
Isn't
So
that great
every
though? It's wonderful. I mean, you can make, you just by taking out one word and putting in a different word, it becomes a completely different piece of work. It's incredible. If I ask you, I mean, I feel as if I have already seen the streaming series City Under One Roof because it is so visual in this book. Dare I ask if, I mean, it's great enough as a book, and I'm not pushing you. It doesn't matter if it ever gets made into anything, but is there a possibility that we might see this on screen? It's just so perfect for
um
it.
There is a possibility. Right now we are talking to I've had talks with a couple of producers, and there are possibly more that may be interested. I'm not as sure because I have an agent who is fielding the calls for that, and I'm sort of, until it's settled, I don't
Yeah.
get
I even
involved.
apologize for asking because I just want to celebrate the book, and whatever happens with whatever else is great because this book stands on its own as a marvelous, marvelous story. Everybody is asking, you were talking about, you alluded to a second book. Is it a second in the series?
Yes, there's actually a second book in the series that is due very soon. So I am working hard on it.
And can you tell us any, I mean, who is the main character still Kara?
Yes, you will still see Kara as a main character. So you'll see some of the characters from the book one, and then some new ones as well.
Did you know when you started writing this that there would be more in the series?
Yes, actually, I did have already a deal for book two.
Okay. Okay. Because you would write it differently if there were a possibility that all of the characters in book one, might not make it into book two. And a standalone, like you could kill everyone and nobody would be safe. But the one of the joys and one of the difficulties of writing a series character is that the reader knows she'll be okay, that because there she's got to be in book two. So did you face that situation?
Um, so yeah, so I knew early on that there was going to be a book two. But I was thinking, should I have, can it go on beyond that? And I know I was given the advice, no, to just end it at two. So It
Really?
is going
Okay.
to end it.
I don't know whether the public clamor, I mean, everybody who reads this will love it, and everybody will really want to read book 2. So I think we should just let the public decide what should happen to your characters. Should we take one last question, Iris? Do you have a minute for one last question
Sure.
before we go to what factors, says, hello, Ahmed. What factors did you consider when deciding Kara's background? Did you consider her as a returning character when you created her? We sort of talked about that. We're on the same wavelength here. But how did you decide about who she would be?
Yeah, Kara was the most difficult because she is, she's sort of the voice that we're following as being the outsider. And, coming up with her backstory, I knew she was, because I knew she, okay, so I knew she was sort of the voice that we're following, the narrator. So I didn't want her to be too like unique. I mean, like having that kind of unique voice like Amy and Lonnie do, but I still wanted to give her 3 dimensions and something, something about her that's interesting and that could give her an arc. And I just thought, I don't know who said this, but you think of your character and give her like facing her worst fears.
Yes.
And so I knew that the city was very claustrophobic. And so I thought, okay, she's got to be claustrophobic. And so, but what caused that claustrophobia was the interesting like exploration of, what her trauma was.
Yes. And more than that, we will not say, because the reveals of those in the book are captivating. I keep using that word, but that's what Sarah says. They're engaging and captivating and surprising and logical, and understandable, and just make us connect, each one, Amy, Lonnie, and Kara, connect with those characters and understand why. We completely understand why they do what they do when it's time for us to know that. We're talking about City Under One Roof, the marvelous new novel by Iris Yamashita, and we are going to spin the wheel of fun right now. You love this. Spin the wheel of fun to see who wins a copy of this. Someday we will have music for this, you all. I know we will. Or else we can just all hum in the background. And the winner is Sue Johnson Bishop. Oh, you lucky woman. That is great. We will be telling you how to get your copy of City Under One Roof. Iris, it's been great. You get the final word, second to final word. How are you feeling about just the acclamation for this book?
It's just been amazing. I feel like with screenwriting, I had the lightning strikes moment where, my first job was with Clint Eastwood, which, is just wow. And then it feels like it's happening again, like with this book, that it's another lightning strikes moment where, everybody's being so kind with the reviews and just more than I ever expected, and just love how welcoming everyone has been, including other authors such as yourself, and, being able to get blurbs from other amazing novelists. That, I mean, the feeling of this sort of community of writers is just so nice. And I mean, I think I want to be here to stay for sure.
Well, we want you to be here to stay for sure as well. You all, if you're not Sue Johnson Bishop, who just won the copy of City Under One Roof, you run right out and click or go to your favorite bookstore and buy Iris Yamashita's City Under One Roof. If you have a favorite library, also marvelous to take it out of the library. It really makes a difference to authors when their books stay in circulation. So favorite bookstore, favorite library, do not miss City Under One Roof. And I know we will be hearing more from you. Iris, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, my complete pleasure. Before I let you all go, don't you all go, because I want to show you next week, next Tuesday on Primetime, we are double booked. And Crime Time is the only place where it's great to be double booked. At 3:00 special time, we will have Kat Rosenfield with You Must Remember This, Old Money, Dark Secrets, and Cold Blood, it says on the cover. All right, you know what you're getting with this. She is amazing. She was nominated for an Edgar last year, and this is her second book. So let's see how, I can't wait. This is my weekend reading. Also, Michael Bennett at 4:00, Michael Bennett's Better the Blood. And my husband snagged this book when I got it in the mail, just swiped it, and he absolutely loved it. So I can't wait to read it. So 3:00 on Tuesday, next Tuesday, You Must Remember This by Kat Rosenfield. 4:00, Better the Blood by Michael Bennett. And today, this is my Vanna White life, holding up books. City Under One Roof by Iris Yamashita. Iris, thank you. You all, thank you. We love that you are here today. And remember, until next Tuesday, it is always safe inside a book. And we will see you next time.